I'll tell you about 3 things I'm working on. First of all, I'm 79, and 79 is the new 77. I came up with that joke because I was thinking how hard it is to invent a joke. A joke is an extraordinary thing. And about 6 months ago, I had dinner with Woody Allen, and I said, Woody, I understand you told this joke that 80 is the new dead. And he's all this self-deprecating, he's just the way he is in the movie. Well, yeah, I said that, but I didn't make it up. That was it. So I thought, well, what does it take to make up a joke? And how interesting a joke is, because a joke is the opposite of expectations. It's really a radical alternative. It's what we do. When we create something, we think of radical alternatives. And so there's an echo in here with this, right? Or is it just me? Do you hear an echo? That's the classic answer when you say you're hard of hearing. What? So humor and the design of humor, the design of what a joke is extraordinary in that it has this whole notion of opposites. Niels Bohr, some of you know, was a physicist. And he said when he comes up with a profound thought, he realizes that the opposite of it is also profound. That opposites of things are just amazing. The unexpected part of our conversation, why we laugh, and we love to laugh at things. The unexpected, it's one thing we do so amazing. You probably have said this here before, I don't think you get married or you have a relationship because of, well, you might have a relationship, but you don't get married, you don't have a long-term relationship because of sex, you have it because of conversation. And conversation is so much made up of this understanding and this sense of humor, the sense of what you both get. I'm working on 3 things. I don't have an office and I have no ambition whatsoever anymore. I have an assistant who gets the phone, often wrong, and I think up some ideas, and it sounds like an ideal life that I don't have clients. I mean, that really sounds ideal to most people, that you don't have to work for anybody. It is fucking terrifying. There's nothing I work on that I have to think up and then I have to convince somebody to have me do it. It is not a pleasant life. It's not of my choosing. It comes from the fact that I'm abrasive. And I'm charming. But I can't hold a job, and I've just been fired through my whole life. This guy who was talking about failure here, I didn't know what he was talking about. I mean, that's all I've done is I've failed. But here's the interesting thing about failure is, if I'm standing here and I have my equilibrium and I throw a leg out, I lose my equilibrium, I failed. I've lost my equilibrium in a moment of failure. I gain my equilibrium, come up, and I do that again. Look at that. But here, wasn't it interesting? The 2 things that are occurring is I'm failing and I'm moving forward. That this risk of failure moves you forward. And it's a really interesting idea to have in your head of what it means. That it is, you don't get over the terror or the upsetness. I hate failing. I don't go to failing. I wouldn't teach failing. But I know I'm going to screw up, and with almost everything. There's a great film that I've seen several times on some odd channel where it shows Picasso painting a picture, rubbing it out, and painting it again, rubbing it out, and painting it again. And he goes on for, I think, about a half an hour, and you don't want him to rub it out each time because each time it's a masterpiece. And no, stop, it's so good. And he rubs it out, and he goes, and he's constantly making this conversation of fail. It's not good enough, and he fails, and he corrects it, and in correcting it, he finds a new path to do something, and he paints over it, and it's completely inspirational to me, and it's so uncomfortable because I want each thing. I don't have his ability, his guts, his seeing that he can make it better. It's fascinating. Students sometimes write me if they can find out how to get me, and they write me and they want me to answer a question I can't type. And so I dictate my answer, and my answer is I can't type. And my assistant does that a lot. She writes letters saying, Mr. Wurman wanted me to let you know that he can't type. But that his secret to success is that he wants to have interesting days, and today was pretty interesting. That's my advice. I didn't say happy, I said interesting. The 3 projects I'm working on, one I've worked on since 1962. I was 26. I did a book of the plans of 50 cities of the world, all to the same scale. You know about that. I guess you know about it. A couple people know about it. It was my first book. 26 is fairly young. And I was an assistant professor of architecture. And my students and I did these plans of cities. We made them all the same scale. We made them out of plasticine. We could only do half of them, and then we had to scrape off the plasticine because we didn't have enough money to buy more plasticine and make the other half. But we photographed them in between. And it was the first comparative. I didn't know that at the time. It was an accident. But it was the first time anybody had comparatively looked at cities at the same scale. And that's been a passion in my life. Cartography is one of the things I'm really interested in. And a few years later, I did the first comparative statistical atlas of major American cities for a big atlas for MIT. Then I did a road atlas because I bought a car and I got the Rand McNally atlas, and I realized you don't drive across the United States alphabetically. And that's the way it was organized. I know you're laughing at it, but I'm not simple-minded. I just looked at it. I mean, you're laughing because you think, oh, that's clever, or he's profound. I'm not profound, I'm not clever. You just don't drive across the United States alphabetically. The same way as when you go to a city and you end up in a hotel, what do? You want to know where are you and what's around you. And your guidebook has a chapter on hotels, a chapter on restaurants, a chapter on museums, a chapter on this. And you end up asking a concierge, where can I eat not too expensive that I can walk to? You want to know where you are and what's around you. Pretty simple shit, right? Nothing is much more complicated than that in my life. I'm not so bright. I'm not a very bright person. And my only power comes from that I really know more than he knows. I know how stupid I am. I more embrace my stupidity than you embrace your stupidity, and that's in your way. He thinks he's bright. I know I'm not bright, so everything can come in, and I can see patterns. I can see patterns because I gave up a long time ago trying to impress anybody about anything. So I had a company called Access Press and did 22 guidebooks to cities around the world and fussed around with cartography then. And now we can take a long span from 26 to 77, that's 50 years. I finally, by an accident of knowing everybody, I got together with a wonderful man by the name of Jack Dangerman, and he owns a company called Esri, and they're the largest maker of software for maps in the world. They have maps with content. And between the floorboards, nobody ever did maps to the same scale or with the same legends. I know you think that's what Google Earth does. It doesn't. You can't put up Sao Paulo and Shanghai and compare them. You can't look at patterns of land use from one to another. It's not based, the mapping system, the cartographic system isn't based on that. You can't get there from here, from where they are. It just doesn't work. You have to invent a new cartography. So I've invented a new cartography, and we now have 58 cities. It'll be 100. And we have, I'm going to show you some slides, an urban observatory where we're comparing 100 cities at about 20 or 30 levels of stuff. And that's the website. You can look at it. It's free. I'm not conning you into anything. I'm not selling a book. I'm not selling a charity. I don't want you to ring my bell. But you can see it there, and it's free, and I'll show you some stuff at it. In fact, why don't we go through them real quick, these slides, because that does it. This shows you the exhibit. This is a comp of the exhibit. See these 3 panels? These are the panels. And this shows somebody working it. It's all, you just touch the thing, and you can have the whole thing, and it's free. And it lives off the cloud. And all the information comes down. And we have a lot of live information. You can see the noise in the city. You can see all different kinds of things. You make one map bigger, they all become bigger. You make it smaller, it becomes smaller. You want to keep on adding other cities, you just add them off the cloud. It's just there. It's a new kind of museum where you could have that panel anywhere for a couple $1,000 in any library, anywhere, and you could see this information about cities comparatively around the world. It's a different kind of museum. A museum that isn't just in one place, that has objects. Well, you see how it works, right? That's live traffic flow patterns and stuff like that. You can get it. But you could have one here. You could have it anywhere. And this leads into another idea I have called the orchard of understanding. If you can picture this, I'm doing some amazing, John Grimwade is doing some amazing renderings of this. It's an outdoor museum. Let's see if I can quickly picture it. Are we through this? No. Let's get to the slides so I can show you the exhibit. Quickly go through the slides here. Next. This is the room in the Smithsonian. It's going to be on the mall in the castle, you know, and it's going to be like the Sistine Chapel of Understanding. You'll see it in a minute. Some big films. Next. And so we're going to have this room where we're going to have stuff all around, stuff like that. So my 2 partners are Jack Dangerman of Esri and John Kamen of Radical Media. So anyway, this is an interesting project. I find it interesting, and it fulfills something I've been working on for 50 years. I'll do the 2 other ideas, and if I have time, I'll do the Orchard of Understanding, which is a killer idea. And I don't even think I told you about it ever. You don't know about that one. Each year, they do a poster at the Esri conference. The Esri conference is a user conference, has 16,000 cartographers from 150 countries come, and they do a poster with one of my early books on it, and on the other side, one of my bon mots. I think up clever things. So understanding precedes action. You want to understand something relative to something you understand. And this year it was transforming big data into big understanding, which IBM is going to steal next year. These are the posters, see them? And see, these are the models of 50 cities. These are the 50 cities in the world, the clay models from 1962. And the upper there was the one panel of, from 1967 of New York City. And then this is traffic flow from the Urban Observatory this year, transforming big data into big understanding. It's actually happening. Next. And then that's me, John Kamen, of the brilliant company Radical Media. They do extraordinary things. If you don't know Radical Media, you should. And then Jack, this one-off character that has Esri, all GIS mapping, and he owns Landsat. He's just an amazing man. Going to have dinner with him Sunday night in New York. So I now have 15 seconds. Oh, I'm past. I'm 17 seconds over. I'll quickly do the other 2 things I'm working on. One is, a year ago, some of you know I created the TED conference and ran it for 18 years. And then I diddled around with another conference called EG, and then another conference called TEDMED, which I started in 1995, and still goes on. And now I'm trying to find new models for other ways people can gather. So year and a half ago, I did the best conference I've ever done, and by far the best conference. The next one I do will not be as good. I'm doing it anyway because I want to experiment with it, but it won't be as good. And the one I did, which was really the essence of conference, was I got 50 absolutely extraordinary people, the best people. If I cherry-picked 10 TED conferences when I was running it, I wouldn't have gotten those 50 people. There is an app of the whole conference, unedited, where people didn't read off of teleprompters, didn't rehearse, didn't read speeches. And I paired them with people they didn't know who they were going to be paired with. I started them with a premise. They didn't know what the premise was going to be. There was 25 different premises for the 50 people. And it was all intellectual jazz. It was improvised conversation. So it was like Yo-Yo Ma and David Brooks. I mean, it was just combinations of people talking. It was astonishing. It really was exciting, and I was terrified. And my best friends said it wouldn't work. And I was really afraid it wouldn't work, that people would not be able to look at the audience because they faced each other. They didn't face the audience. The back thing was just a concrete wall. There was no screen. They weren't allowed to talk about their work. Basically, they could just talk to each other after I started them with a premise. So for instance, there was a astrophysicist and a small particle physicist. She had just come from CERN with the Higgs thing, and he was running, and he is still running, the Juno mission, which is the mission to Jupiter. And what I said to them, they hadn't met. And she was a little testy, actually. Well, she was. And I said, you're both physicists, but you both have a different definition of the word elegance, which is a physics term. And you look at the periodic table differently. You in the Jupiter mission, the Juno mission, Jupiter, you look just at the light elements. You look at helium and hydrogen and helium. And the rest, they're all heavy. You don't really care about them. And the small particle physicist not only looks at all the elements, they're trying to create new ones. Complete different. You're both physicists. You don't have a common language. That's true, by the way, in medicine. It's true in cartography. It's true in most fields. There's not a common language that we share in a fundamental way. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in saying something and somebody understanding me and I understand them. And it happens infrequently. Out there in the lobby, you're saying, so how's it going? Keeping busy? What do you expect for an answer? How's everything going? What do you expect? Either last year or 2 years ago, I turned those letters around and I put them in the order and it said fib. Because I said we just lie to each other constantly. Today I was going to put the I here because it was about me and it was easier to move. But you could put if here too. Okay, so that's, I'm doing a new conference which is going to be not about incremental change. It's really about reaction to what people call innovation. I think Honda has an ad where they say they have an innovative car because they have a rear-facing camera on it. You can see who you run over. And that's innovation. Most innovation, virtually all innovation, if you see the term innovation, run, because it doesn't mean anything. It's just incremental change, which companies have to do. Incremental, positive, constructive change is certainly what every company needs to do. But there's another branch, and Chris and I were talking about this before I started talking here today, that's a valid branch for every company to do. But there's another branch out of here, which is game-changing. What are the things that might happen in 5 years? How does the world prepare, and what are the unintended consequences? So, for instance, there's going to be a vaccination for malaria. It's really terrific. It's good. It'll probably happen in the next 4 years. It'll be approved, go through the system, and 1 million mostly young kids won't die. In countries where the birth rate is very high because the death rate is so high, they have a high birth rate, so they have people it's a natural cultural thing to have many children because a number of them die. But they also don't have very much food. So you're certainly going to want to have this vaccination. The unintended consequences is you're going to have 1 million people that aren't going to die, they're going to starve to death. You have to think about what the next step is with anything you innovate. There's natural disasters. Most of you know by now that the volcano that went off in 1783 in Iceland, called Larky, it's spelled L-A-K-I, but they pronounce it Larky, went off for 8 months and went across Europe, down through Europe, down through the Nile over to India. 5 million people died because it hung there for 3 years, and they lost 3 years of crops. And in France, it's generally accepted that it was one of the fundamental reasons for the French Revolution. It's believed by everybody but the French, who want to feel that it was a political revolution, because they had no crops of wheat. The famous phrase that was never said, "Let 'em eat cake," comes from the fact there was no wheat. And there was no wheat because of a volcano in Iceland. It's unintended consequences that happen. As will happen with the Northwest Passage and the Northeast Passage, there's going to be unintended consequences with the Panama Canal, and that is already starting to be open. Okay, he wants to get me off stage, so I have to tell one thing fast. He's itching at his things. I could manipulate the audience, and I could say, "Don't you want to hear these other things?" Let's have a vote. Do you want me to say these other things? I'll just do one. No, I'll do one more idea that I'm doing. Just stand here. I'm not gonna come back next year.
Just stand here?
But I'm not gonna come back next year. I know I can read the fucking thing. Yeah. Yeah. That means I'm dying. Time's up. So,
how about a round of applause for...
No. Let me finish. So, I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you a 3-minute story, which is the beginning of a major book that I'm doing now.
Okay.
I decided I wasn't going to do any more books because I've done 80-some, but I've decided to do one more book. And the beginning of it, here's the beginning, and it is in this conversational tone, the way it begins. I just landed at London Heathrow, and I was jet lagged. I went into the city, and crossing the street, I almost got hit by a bus because I looked the wrong way. And I looked at the bus, and I realized it's about the size of a blue whale's tongue. And I'm exaggerating because it was a double-decker bus. But as the bus comes to a screeching stop, it's hit in its rear by a Volkswagen Beetle, which was Hitler's people's car, and it's the size of a blue whale's heart, the aorta of which you can swim through. And it was built in 1935, the year I was born. Thank you very much.